I never imagined that the shadow of death would wear a tailored suit and sit in the back of a courtroom, his eyes fixed on me like a predator deciding whether to strike or savor. But there he was, Dante Russo, the Mafia boss whose name alone could empty a room, attending my hearing for a crime I didn't commit. Or at least that's what the world believed. Everyone whispered, their stares burning into my skin. Why would he defend a total stranger? The truth was a blade I'd buried deep in my chest, one that twisted every time I breathed. If they knew the real reason, the courtroom would have turned into a graveyard. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry hornets, casting harsh shadows on the wooden benches where spectators huddled like vultures. I sat at the defense table, my wrists raw from the cuffs they'd removed only moments before, the metallic tang of fear still coating my tongue. My lawyer, a jittery man named Harlan, with sweat stains blooming under his arms, kept glancing back at the gallery, his face paling when he spotted Russo. "Who the hell is that?" he muttered under his breath, as if saying the name aloud might summon a demon. I didn't answer. How could I? The story started long before this farce of a trial, in the underbelly of the city where secrets festered like open wounds. It began with a debt I never asked for, inherited from a father who'd gambled his life away in Russo's casinos. He died owing more than blood could pay, and I was the collateral. But Russo didn't come for me then. No, he waited, letting the noose tighten around my neck until I was dangling in this courtroom, accused of murdering a low-level enforcer in his own syndicate. The irony was a poison I swallowed daily. The man I'd killed wasn't random. He was the one who'd come for me first, on Russo's orders, or so I thought. The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot, pulling me back. "The court calls the next witness," he intoned, his voice flat as the justice he pretended to dispense. My heart hammered as the doors swung open, and in walked Russo himself, his presence sucking the air from the room. He moved with the lethal grace of a man who owned every shadow he cast, his dark hair slicked back, eyes like polished obsidian that missed nothing. The murmurs erupted, reporters scribbling furiously, prosecutors exchanging panicked glances. Why him? Why now? He took the stand without a flicker of emotion, swearing on a Bible that probably burned his hand. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman named Reyes, approached him warily, like he was a bomb with a lit fuse. "Mr. Russo, can you explain your relationship to the defendant, Ilara Voss?" "None," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "Liar!" The word screamed in my mind, but I kept my face blank, my fingers clenched under the table. We'd never spoken, never touched, but his world had entangled mine years ago. When my father begged for mercy in Russo's office, I was hiding in the vents above, a scared girl of 14 witnessing the brutality that followed. Russo had spared my father that night, but not without a price. "She's a pawn in a game she doesn't understand," he'd said then, his words etched into my memory. Now, here he was, playing God again. Reyes pressed on. "Then why are you here, testifying on her behalf?" "Because the real killer is still out there," Russo replied, his gaze sliding to me for the briefest moment. It was a look that promised pain, not salvation. "And I have evidence that clears her." The courtroom exploded into chaos, but all I could feel was the ice creeping up my spine. Evidence? What game was he running? I knew the truth. I'd pulled the trigger on that enforcer, Marco, in a dingy alley after he'd cornered me, whispering Russo's name like a curse. Self-defense, or so I'd convinced myself. But if Russo was defending me, it meant he wanted something worse than my death. He wanted me alive, indebted, trapped in his web. As the hearing adjourned for recess, Harlan pulled me aside in the holding room, his breath reeking of cheap coffee. "This changes everything, Alara. Russo's word could swing the jury. But why you? You're nobody." I forced a laugh, brittle and sharp. Maybe he likes underdogs. But inside, the memories clawed at me. The night Marco had dragged me from my apartment, his hands bruising my arms, his breath hot against my ear. "Boss says hello," he'd growled before I fought back, grabbing his gun in the struggle. The shot echoed in my nightmares, but so did the question, why send Marco if Russo knew who I was? Before we continue the story, please drop a comment telling me where you're watching this from, and don't forget to subscribe to Mara's Betrayal. Back in the courtroom, the tension coiled tighter as Russo's evidence was presented, a forged alibi from one of his underlings, claiming I'd been at a charity event he sponsored that night. Lies wrapped in silk, but the jury ate it up, their eyes wide with the thrill of brushing against power. I watched Russo from across the room, his profile carved from stone, wondering if he remembered that girl in the vents, eavesdropping on her father's humiliation. Did he know I'd seen him execute a traitor that same night, blood splattering the walls like abstract art? The day dragged on, questions flying like bullets. Reyes grilled Russo, but he deflected with the ease of a man who'd buried bodies deeper than her career. "Miss Voss is innocent," he insisted, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Innocent. The word tasted like ash. I wasn't innocent. I'd clawed my way through foster homes after my father's suicide, learning to pick locks and forge papers just to survive. And now this man who'd indirectly caused it all was my savior? The twist in my gut told me it was a leash, not a lifeline. As evening fell, the judge called a halt, scheduling continuation for tomorrow. Harlan escorted me back to the cells, babbling about miracles. But alone in the dim light, I paced, my mind racing. Why defend me? The answer hit like a sucker punch. Because I knew too much. That night in the vents, I'd overheard more than pleas, codes to his vaults, names of rivals. I'd buried it all, but maybe he'd finally connected the dots. Or worse, maybe he needed me for something darker. Sleep evaded me, shadows dancing on the walls like ghosts. I replayed every glance Russo had given me, each one a silent threat. By morning, the hearing resumed, and the whispers had turned to roars. Media swarmed outside, chanting my name like a curse. Inside, Russo was gone, but his shadow lingered. Reyes called me to the stand, her eyes predatory. "Miss Voss, do you know Dante Russo?" "No," I lied, my voice steady despite the storm inside. But as I spoke, a note was slipped to me by the bailiff, a scrap of paper with elegant script. "We need to talk. Midnight. The docks." No signature, but I knew. The hearing blurred after that, my mind fixated on the note. Harlan argued technicalities, but the damage, or salvation, was done. By afternoon, the charges were provisionally dropped, pending further investigation. Freedom tasted like chains as I stepped into the sunlight, reporters shoving mics in my face. "Why did Russo defend you?" they shouted. I pushed through, hailing a cab to my rundown apartment. But as I unlocked the door, a chill slithered down my neck. The place was ransacked, drawers emptied, pictures smashed. In the center of the chaos, A single rose lay on the table, thorns intact, a drop of blood on the stem. His calling card. I burned the note, but the words seared my brain. Midnight approached like an executioner's axe. I could run, but where? Russo's reach was endless. Arming myself with a kitchen knife, I headed to the docks, the fog rolling in like a shroud. The water lapped hungrily at the piers, and there he stood, silhouetted against the moon, a cigarette glowing in his hand. "You came," he said, not turning. His voice was velvet over steel. "What do you want?" I demanded, gripping the knife in my pocket. He faced me then, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "The truth, Alara. About what you saw that night in my office, and why you killed Marco." My blood ran cold. He knew. But before I could respond, headlights pierced the fog. Multiple cars, engines growling. Russo's hand shot out, pulling me behind a crate. "They're not mine," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. Gunfire erupted, shattering the night. Bullets whizzed past, and in that moment I realized this wasn't just about defense. It was war. And I was the spark. The first bullet splintered the crate inches from my face, showering me with wood shards that tasted like splinters of my own coffin. I didn't scream. I'd learned long ago that screaming only told monsters exactly where you were. Dante Russo shoved me deeper into the shadows between two rusted shipping containers, his body a wall of heat and muscle against mine. His gun was already in his hand. I hadn't even seen him draw it, a matte black Beretta that looked like an extension of his arm. The muzzle flashed once, twice, 3 times. Somewhere out in the fog, a man gurgled and dropped. "Stay low," he ordered, voice calm as a priest giving absolution. I obeyed, but only because the alternative was dying. My own knife felt pathetic now, a child's toy against the roar of automatic fire chewing up the pier. Salt air mixed with gunpowder and blood. Another body hit the planks with a wet thud. "Who are they?" I hissed. "Volkov's dogs," he answered, reloading without looking. "They think I've gone soft. Defending a stranger in open court? Bad optics." A stranger. The word stung more than the wood fragments in my cheek. I wanted to laugh, to tell him I'd watched him put a bullet in a man's mouth when I was 14, that I still heard the wet pop in my nightmares. Instead, I whispered, "You brought me here to die with you." He turned his head just enough for the moonlight to catch the scar that ran through his left eyebrow. "I brought you here to see if you'd run. You didn't. Good." Another burst of gunfire. He returned fire, precise, economical. A scream cut short. Boots pounded closer. 3 shooters, maybe 4. Dante's jaw tightened. "When I say go, you run to the end of Pier 7. Black Maserati, keys under the mat. Don't stop." "I'm not leaving you." "You are," he said, and there was something final in it. "Because if they take me alive, they'll use you to make me talk. And I will talk, Alara. Everyone does." The honesty in his voice terrified me more than the bullets. A grenade clattered across the boards. He cursed in Italian, scooped it up, and hurled it back the way it came. The explosion lit the fog orange, silhouetted men flying like broken dolls. Then he grabbed my wrist and yanked me into motion. We ran. Wood became asphalt, became the stink of diesel. My lungs burned. Behind us, engines roared to life. They weren't giving up. Dante fired over his shoulder without breaking stride. A bullet grazed his arm. I saw the fabric of his jacket darken, but he didn't flinch. Pier 7. The Maserati crouched under a broken lamp like a panther. He shoved me toward the passenger door. "Drive." "I don't have a license." "You've stolen worse." He slid across the hood, dropped into the driver's seat, and the engine snarled awake before I'd even closed my door. Tires screamed. We shot out of the port, bullets spiderwebbing the rear window. Dante drove like the devil was late on a payment, one-handed, the other pressing his bleeding arm. Streetlights strobed across his face, turning him demonic. "Where are we going?" I asked, clutching the seat as he took a corner hard enough to lift 2 wheels. "Somewhere they won't look first. If you're still watching the story till now, drop a comment so I know you're with me." He took us north, past the city limits, into the pine-choked hills where the rich built houses no one visited. The bleeding had slowed, but his sleeve was soaked. I tore a strip from my shirt, the only clean thing I owned, and pressed it to the wound. "You're shaking," he observed. "You're bleeding on Italian leather." A ghost of amusement touched his mouth. Priorities. The driveway was hidden behind a rusted gate that looked abandoned. He killed the lights and coasted through. The house beyond was dark, windows boarded, but the door opened when he pressed his thumb to a panel I couldn't even see. Inside smelled of dust and old money. He locked us in, set the alarm with a code I memorized out of habit, 7391, then leaned against the wall and finally let pain show on his face. Bathroom, top cabinet, stitch kit. I found it, military grade, black thread, lidocaine, the works. When I came back, he'd stripped off his shirt. The body underneath was a map of violence, scars like white lightning across muscle, a tattooed saint's weeping blood on his ribs. I tried not to stare. "Ever sewn a man before?" he asked. "Only buttons." He laughed once, low and rough. "Then learn fast." I cleaned the wound with vodka from the cabinet. He didn't flinch, and threaded the needle. My hands were steady only because I refused to let them shake. The bullet had gone clean through the meat of his biceps. I poured lidocaine, waited 30 seconds, then started stitching. He watched me the entire time. Not the needle, me. "You have your father's hands," he said quietly. The needle slipped. I felt the prick in my own flesh. "Don't." "He begged me not to hurt you. That night. Said you were all he had left." Dante's voice was soft, almost conversational, as I pulled thread through his skin. "I told him debts are debts, but I let him walk out alive. Do you know why?" I tied off the last knot, cut the thread with my teeth. "Because you're secretly a saint?" "Because I wanted to see what the daughter of a desperate man would become." His good hand lifted, slow, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His knuckles were smeared with both our blood. "I didn't expect this." I stepped back, heart battering my ribs. "You don't get to touch me." "Not yet," he agreed, and the promise in those 2 words sank into my bones like winter. He stood, towering even wounded, and walked to a wall safe, hidden behind a terrible oil painting of dogs playing poker. Inside, cash, passports, guns, and a single photograph. He handed it to me. It was me. Age 14, hiding in the vents, eyes wide, cheeks streaked with tears. The angle was from below, his perspective that night. "I kept it," he said simply. "I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, 'What do you want from me?' Everything you saw, everything you remember. Names, routes, vault combinations. You were a child, but children notice details adults miss. He closed the safe. And I give you a new life. You give me the keys to bury the people trying to kill us both tonight. Blackmail. Insurance, he corrected. Volkov thinks I'm protecting you because I'm fucking you. That makes you leverage. I'd rather you be an ally. I laughed, a broken sound. You think I'd ever trust you? No, he said, but you'll need me before I need you. His phone buzzed, burner encrypted. He listened, face hardening with every second. When he hung up, the air felt colder. They hit my warehouse on the east side, took 3 men, left a message in blood, return the girl or the city burns. My stomach dropped. They think you have me. I do have you. He moved to a window, parted the boards an inch. Dawn was bleeding across the hills. Question is what I do with you now. I followed his gaze. In the distance, smoke rose, his empire already on fire. He turned back, something ruthless and exhausted in his eyes. There's a helicopter coming in 40 minutes. It can take you anywhere. New name, new country, enough money to disappear forever. Or you can stay and help me end this war tonight. 40 minutes to decide if I wanted to run from the devil or make a deal with him. I looked at the photograph still in my hand, 14-year-old me staring down at the man who would one day own my fate. Clock's ticking, Ilara. Outside the first bird called, lonely and sharp. I tore the photograph in half, let the pieces flutter to the floor like dead moths. Teach me how to burn them all, I said. His smile was slow, terrible and beautiful. Then we start with blood. He didn't kiss me. He didn't say, "Welcome to the family." He simply walked to the gun safe, opened it, and started laying weapons on the table like a surgeon lays out instruments. A suppressed Glock 19, a short-barreled AR-15 with a red dot, a sawed-off Remington that looked older than both of us, and last, a .38 revolver with mother-of-pearl grips. He spun the cylinder, checked the load, and slid it across the wood toward me. "Your father's?" he said. I stared at the gun. I had watched my father clean it the night before he hanged himself in the garage. Same scratches on the frame, same chip in the pearl. My throat closed. "Where did you—" "I bought it off the pawn shop that bought his things after the funeral," Dante said. "I always planned to return it, just never decided when." I picked it up. It weighed exactly like every nightmare I'd ever had. He watched me weigh it in my palm. "You still know how to use it?" I thumbed the hammer back. The click was intimate, familiar. I never forgot. He nodded once, satisfied, then handed me a shoulder holster that smelled of gun oil and someone else's sweat. "We leave in 20. Shower. Burn everything you're wearing. There's clothes in the duffel. Your size." I didn't ask how he knew my size. I already knew the answer. He'd known everything about me for 11 years. The shower was ice cold and perfect. I scrubbed blood and salt and fear from my skin until it was raw. When I stepped out, the mirror was fogged, but I could still see the girl in the vents staring back at me. Only now her eyes were older and they weren't crying anymore. The clothes fit like they were tailored yesterday. Black jeans, black tank, a leather jacket that carried the faint scent of Dante's cologne. I hated that it felt like armor. He was waiting downstairs, dressed in fresh black, the wound on his arm already hidden under a new shirt. A duffel of magazines and grenades sat by the door. He looked like war incarnate. "Helicopters scrapped," he said. "They shot the pilot an hour ago. We're driving." We took an old Land Rover hidden under tarps in the barn. He drove. I rode shotgun with the .38 on my lap and the AR between my knees. The sky was the color of a fresh bruise. Halfway down the mountain, his phone buzzed again. He put it on speaker. "Boss!" It was Luca, his underboss, voice ragged. "They hit the North Safe House. Took Sophia." Sophia. His sister. I'd read about her in the papers. 25, Columbia Law. The one Russo who was supposed to be clean. Dante's knuckles went white on the wheel. "Alive?" "For now. They want the girl by midnight. Same place they killed Marco." The line went dead. I felt the shift in him immediately, like someone had flipped a switch from cold to absolute zero. "Change of plans," he said. "We're getting her back first." I didn't argue. I was done running. We hit the city just after dusk. He took back roads, alleys, places that didn't exist on any map. Every few minutes he glanced at me like he was checking I was still breathing. Finally he spoke. "You can still walk away. I'll drop you at the train station. Wired account, new passport. You vanish. I'll tell them you jumped out a window and died." I looked at the revolver in my lap. "And Sophia? She's not your debt." "No," I said. "She's yours, and I'm collecting interest." He almost smiled. We parked 3 blocks from the warehouse where they were holding her. An abandoned cold storage plant on the river, windows painted black, the stench of fish and death baked into the bricks. Dante killed the engine. "Volkov will be there himself," he said. "He likes to watch." He handed me an earpiece. "You go in through the old ice chute on the roof. I'll draw them to the loading bay. 30 seconds after the first explosion, you drop in, find Sophia, get her to the river door. Boat's waiting. And you? I'll be the explosion." I wanted to say something sharp, something that I didn't trust him not to die dramatically and leave me holding the bag. Instead, I just nodded. He reached over and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Slow, deliberate, the first time he'd touched me without violence or necessity. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, lingered. "If I don't come out," he said, "burn everything. My servers, my houses, the ledgers in the lake house safe. Code is the night your father died. 0418, I swallowed. "You'll come out." He looked at me for a long second, something raw and unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then he was gone, melting into the dark. I climbed the fire escape to the roof, heart hammering so hard I tasted metal. The ice chute was exactly where he said, rusted hatch, padlock long since cut. I dropped into freezing darkness, boots hitting decades of frost with a crunch. Inside was a cathedral of meat hooks and shadows. My breath fogged. I moved low, AR up, following the faint sound of a woman sobbing. I found Sophia in the old freezer room, zip-tied to a chair, face bruised, lip split. She looked up when I cut her loose, eyes wide. "You're not one of his," she whispered. "Not yet," I said, slicing the ties. "Can you run?" She nodded. We were 10 feet from the river door when the first explosion rocked the building. Dante's distraction, right on schedule. Dust rained from the ceiling. Alarms screamed. Then Volkov stepped out of the dark ahead of us, flanked by 6 men, a wolf in a $10,000 coat. "Miss Voss," he said in accented English, smiling like we were at a charity gala. "I believe you have something of mine." Sophia shrank against me. I raised the AR. Volkov lifted a remote detonator. "One press and this entire building becomes a tomb. Put the gun down." I hesitated half a second. Long enough. Behind Volkov, A shadow detached from the wall. Dante. Blood on his face, shirt half torn away, but alive. He moved like smoke, knife flashing once, twice. 2 guards dropped before the others even turned. Volkov spun, detonator raised, but Dante was already on him, forearm around his throat, blade kissing carotid. "Drop it," Dante said calmly. Volkov laughed, pressed the button. Nothing happened. Dante leaned close to his ear. "I built this building, remember? I know which wires to cut." Volkov's smile faltered. Dante looked at me over his shoulder. "Take Sophia. Go." I didn't move. "Ilara," he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like a warning and a prayer. "Go." I backed toward the river door, pulling Sophia with me. The remaining guards raised their weapons, but none fired. They were watching their boss bleed. Just before the door closed, I saw Dante whisper something to Volkov. Whatever it was made the Russian's eyes widen in terror. Then the door slammed and Sophia and I ran into the night. The boat was there, engine idling. We scrambled aboard. I cut the line, gunned the throttle. The warehouse shrank behind us, lit from inside by fire. Sophia was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Is he dead?" "No," I said, though I didn't know why I was so sure. We hit open water just as a second, larger explosion bloomed behind us, orange and vicious, swallowing the entire block. The shockwave rocked the boat. Sophia buried her face in my shoulder and sobbed. I stared at the flames, searching for a silhouette that never appeared. Minutes bled into an hour. The city lights receded. My earpiece crackled once, twice, static. Then a voice, hoarse, exhausted, alive. "Riverbend, 2 miles north. Come get me." I turned the boat so hard Sophia nearly fell overboard. He was waiting on the muddy bank, soaked, shirtless, covered in soot and someone else's blood. When he climbed aboard, he didn't look at his sister. He looked only at me. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. He took one step, then another, until we were inches apart. River water dripped from his hair. "You came back," he said. "You thought I wouldn't?" "I hoped," he corrected. Then he kissed me. Not soft, not gentle. Like a man who'd just crawled out of hell and found the only thing worth burning for still breathing. His mouth tasted of smoke and copper and something darker. I kissed him back just as hard, fists curled in what was left of his shirt, anchoring him to this earth, because I was terrified if I let go, he'd vanish into the fire again. Sophia cleared her throat behind us. We broke apart, breathing ragged. Dante looked at his sister, expressions softening a fraction. "You okay?" She nodded, eyes red. "Take me home." He turned back to me. "Not yet. We have one more stop." I knew before he said it. "The courthouse," I whispered. He nodded. "Volkov's dead, but his lieutenants aren't. They'll want proof the war's over, and they'll want you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the torn photograph I'd ripped in half back at the lake house. Somehow he'd kept both pieces. He held them together, the girl in the vents and the man beneath her, then slipped the fragments into my hand. "Time to finish what we started," he said. I looked at the burning skyline behind us, then at the gun in my lap, then at the devil who'd just kissed me like salvation. I chambered around. Then let's go give them a show they'll never forget. The courthouse was closed at 3:17 a.m., but the marble steps still carried the heat of the day. I walked up them barefoot, shoes lost somewhere between the river and the fire, the .38 heavy in my hand. Dante was 2 steps behind me, shirtless under his open coat, blood crusted on his ribs like war paint. Sophia had stayed with the boat and a driver I didn't know. She'd looked at me once, grateful, terrified, already mourning whatever I was about to become, and said nothing. The front doors were locked. Dante didn't slow. He put 2 rounds through the glass, reached in, and opened them from the inside. Alarms shrieked, red lights strobing across the rotunda like a nightclub in hell. We moved fast. He knew every corridor, every camera blind spot. We took the service stairs to the 3rd floor, past the courtroom where, 24 hours earlier, he had pretended to save me. The irony tasted like rust. Room 312, Judge Harlan's chambers. The door was ajar, light spilling out. Inside 5 men waited. Not Volkov's Russians. These were Dante's own. Capos, lieutenants. The ones who had sat in the back of the courtroom yesterday and wondered why their king was protecting trash. They stood in the center, a man named Cesare, silver hair, shark eyes, the one who had taught Dante how to kill when Dante was still a boy. He held a sawed-off across his lap like a sleeping child. "Took you long enough," Cesare said. Dante stopped in the doorway. I stayed half a step behind him, gun lowered, but ready. "You burned half the city tonight," Cesare continued. "For her." He nodded at me. "Explain." Dante's voice was winter. "I don't explain. I rule." Cesare smiled without warmth. "Not anymore. The family's voted. You've gone soft. Or insane. Either way, the crown is heavy, and you're bleeding on it." The other 4 shifted, hands near weapons. I catalogued them the way I'd learned in foster homes. Who would draw first? Who would hesitate? Who would die, screaming? Dante tilted his head. "You want my throne, old man? Take it." He stepped forward, empty-handed, coat open, offering his chest. Cesare raised the shotgun. I shot him in the throat. The pearl-gripped .38 barked once. Cesare's head snapped back, arterial spray painting the American flag behind the desk. The shotgun clattered. Everything happened at once. The room exploded into gunfire and shouting. I dropped behind the leather sofa, bullets shredding cushions, feathers and blood in the air like snow. Dante moved like something born for this. Snatched the shotgun mid-fall, racked it, put 2 blasts into the nearest threats. Bodies jerked and fell. I came up firing, calm in the way only the truly broken can be. One capo lunged for me. I put 3 in his chest and watched the surprise bloom in his eyes. Another tried to run. Dante caught him by the hair and opened his throat with the shotgun's muzzle like a flower. 10 seconds. Maybe 12. Then silence, broken only by the wet sound of blood dripping off mahogany. 5 bodies. One still breathing, Cesare, choking on his own windpipe, clawing at the carpet. Dante knelt beside him. "You taught me loyalty was everything," he said quietly. "But you forgot the other lesson. Never point a gun you aren't prepared to have shoved down your throat." Cesare tried to speak. Only bubbles. Dante stood, looked at me across the carnage. "Still with me?" I stepped over a corpse, reloading without looking. "Try and stop me." He smiled then, small, sharp, proud. We left the chambers exactly as they were. Evidence, a message. Downstairs, the lobby was filling with uniforms, cops on someone's payroll, probably Cesare's last card. Dante raised a hand, and they froze. One look at his face, at the blood, at me standing beside him like I belonged there, and they lowered their weapons. We walked out the front doors into dawn. The steps were already crowded, reporters who never sleep, cameras flashing like strobe lightning. Someone screamed once they saw the blood. Phones rose like periscopes. Dante stopped at the top, pulled me against his side, fingers digging into my hip hard enough to bruise. He didn't speak into the microphones. He didn't have to. The image did the talking. Dante Russo, shirtless, covered in death, holding the girl everyone thought was a nobody, like she was his queen. Headlines wrote themselves. We got into the waiting car, another Maserati, this one midnight blue, and the driver pulled away before the doors were even closed. I was shaking now, adrenaline crashing. Dante noticed. Of course he did. He took the gun from my hand, set it aside, and pulled me across the seat into his lap. I didn't resist. His heart hammered against my cheek, the only proof he was human. You killed for me, he said against my hair. You killed for me first. He laughed once, ragged. Fair. The city blurred past, smoke still rising in the east, sirens converging on the courthouse. I watched it all with the strange detachment of a girl who had just stepped over a line she could never uncross. Where now? I asked. Home, he said. I thought he meant one of his penthouses. I was wrong. We drove north for 2 hours, past suburbs, past trees, until the road narrowed to gravel, and the only light was the moon. A gate opened on its own. Beyond it, a house I'd never seen in any article. Stone and timber, windows dark, built into the side of a cliff like it had grown there. Inside smelled of cedar and gunpowder. No staff, no guards visible. Just us. He locked the door, set the alarm, then turned to me. I expected him to kiss me again. Instead, he dropped to his knees. Slowly, deliberately, he took my right hand, the one still flecked with Cesare's blood, and pressed his lips to my knuckles. I owe you a life debt, he said, voice rough. Name your price. I looked down at him, at the most dangerous man I'd ever met on his knees in front of me, and felt something inside my chest crack open. I want the truth, I said. All of it. From the night my father came to you begging. He closed his eyes for a long second, then stood, took my hand, and led me deeper into the house. We ended in a room with no windows, walls lined in books and ledgers, and one framed photograph. The same one I'd torn in half, now taped back together. He poured 2 glasses of something amber and old. Your father didn't just owe money, he began. He owed lives. He was moving heroin for me through the port, got greedy, started skimming. When I called him on it, he offered him a way out, work it off. He panicked, said he had a daughter, that if anything happened to him, you'd be alone. He drank half the glass in one swallow. I gave him a deadline. He missed it. So I sent Marco to collect. But I told Marco, bring the girl unharmed. I wanted leverage, not a corpse. Marco decided to improvise, tried to rape you in that alley to send me a message. Even my orders weren't sacred anymore. I felt the floor tilt. That's why you killed him, Dante said. Self-defense. I knew the second I saw the body. 1 shot, perfect placement. You'd been taught. He set his glass down. I covered it up because if my own men were disobeying me, the rot was deeper than I thought. Then Cesare started whispering that I was weak for letting a civilian pull a trigger on one of ours. So I put you in that courtroom. Let the city think I was protecting a mistress. Made you the perfect bait. I laughed, a broken sound. You used me. Yes. No apology. And you burned my empire to the ground tonight to save my sister. We're even. I stared at him. Are we? He stepped closer until I had to tilt my head back. No, he admitted. I still owe you. His hand rose, slow enough I could stop him. I didn't. He cupped my jaw, thumb tracing the cut on my cheek from the crate splinters. Ask for anything, Alara. Money, passages out, my life. It's yours. I leaned into his touch, just enough for him to feel it. I want to finish what we started, I said. All of it. Every name I heard that night in the vents. Every traitor still breathing. I want them gone. His eyes darkened with something that looked like reverence. Then we finish it together. He kissed me again, slower this time, tasting of whiskey and war. When we broke apart, both of us were shaking. There's a bedroom upstairs, he said. Shower, sleep. Tomorrow we start hunting. I walked me to the stairs, but stopped at the first step. One more thing, he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, black gold, a single blood-red ruby shaped like a teardrop. My mother's, he said. She wore it the day my father put her. In the ground for betraying him. I swore I'd never give it to anyone. He held it out. I want you to wear it when you kill the last one, so they know who sent you. I took the ring. It was warm from his hand. I slid it onto my left ring finger. It fit perfectly. He exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for 11 years. Upstairs, the shower was hot. I stood under it until the water ran clear. When I stepped out, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. I didn't speak, just opened his arms. I went to him. We didn't have sex that night. We simply held each other, two people who had survived the unsurvivable, listening to the house settle around us like a beast, finally at rest. Just before dawn, he whispered against my neck, "Tomorrow the city wakes up. They'll call you the queen who crowned herself in blood." I smiled into his skin. Let them. Outside, the first light touched the cliffs, and somewhere far away, the remaining traitors started running. They wouldn't get far. I woke to the sound of a blade being sharpened. Slow, rhythmic, patient. Steel kissing stone like a lover who knows exactly how much pressure makes you bleed. Dante sat in the leather chair by the window, shirtless, the morning light cutting across the scars on his back. A whetstone lay across his thighs. In his hands, a thin stiletto that caught the sun and threw it back red. He didn't look up when I stirred. "Sleep?" he asked. "Enough," I said. My voice was gravel. My body felt like it had been taken apart and rebuilt wrong, but the ring on my finger was warm, alive. He tested the edge with his thumb, nodded once, and slid the blade into a sheath at his lower back. Then he stood and crossed the room in 3 silent strides. He didn't ask permission. He simply hooked a finger under my chin and tilted my face to the light, checking the bruises, the cuts, the new map of violence written on my skin. "You heal clean," he murmured almost to himself. "Good." He kissed the worst bruise on my collarbone, once, soft, then walked out. I followed. Breakfast was coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and 2 plates of eggs he cooked without speaking. We ate standing at the counter like soldiers refueling before another march. When the plates were empty, he slid a tablet across the marble. 6 names, 6 photographs. 6 red X's already drawn over 3 of them, Cesare and the 2 capos from the courthouse. The remaining 3 stared back at me. Vincenzo Vinny Moretti, underboss, South Brooklyn, Father Matteo Ricci, confessor to half the families, Detective Sergeant Liam Callahan, NYPD Organized Crime Unit. I looked up. A priest and a cop? "Everyone has a price," Dante said. "Some just hide it behind collars." He tapped Vinny's face. "He's first," He's calling a sit-down tonight at St. Agnes tonight. Neutral ground. He thinks the church will protect him. I laughed once, sharp. It won't. Dante's smile was slow and terrible. No, it won't. We left the house at dusk in a nondescript black Tahoe. I wore the leather jacket from the night before, now cleaned. The .38 tucked inside the waistband at the small of my back. The ruby ring catching the dashboard lights like a warning. St. Agnes sat in the middle of Red Hook, gothic and crumbling, stained glass bleeding color onto the cracked sidewalk. A dozen luxury cars were already parked out front, old school respect for sacred ground. No one carried inside a church. That was the rule. We were going to break it. Dante parked 2 blocks away. He handed me a tiny flesh-colored earpiece and a suppressed Walther PPK. Father Mateo will hear Vinny's confession at 9:30, he said. You'll be in the choir loft. 1 shot, high left temple, exit low right. The angle will look like suicide. By the time anyone realizes different, I'll have Vinny in the crypt. I checked the magazine. 8 rounds. And Callahan? Callahan's waiting outside in an unmarked. He thinks he's here to arrest me after the meeting. He'll get a different surprise. I met his eyes. You planned this the second you knew they turned. I planned this the second I realized you'd kill for me, he corrected. Something hot and vicious flared in my chest. We moved. The side door was unlocked. Someone inside was already bought. I slipped up the narrow spiral stairs to the choir loft while Dante melted into the shadows below. The church smelled of incense and old gilt. Candles flickered. 20 men sat in the pews, murmuring, tense. Vinny in the center aisle, gold pinky ring flashing every time he gestured. Father Mateo appeared from the sacristy in full vestments, face pale, hands trembling. He knew. I lay prone on the cold wood, cheek welded to the Walther's stock, breathing slow. The crosshairs settled just left of the priest's temple. Below, Vinny stood. I call this meeting, he began, voice booming, to declare Dante Russo unfit. The shot was quieter than a cough. Father Mateo's head snapped sideways. Blood and brain painted the marble statue of the Virgin behind him. He dropped like a marionette with cut strings. Chaos. Men shouted, dove for cover, reached for weapons they weren't supposed to have. Dante stepped out of the confessional as calm as death, shotgun rising. I worked the action, chambered another round, and put a bullet through Vinny's knee before he could clear leather. He screamed, went down hard. Dante walked the aisle like a bridegroom, pumping the shotgun one-handed. Every time someone moved, he fired. Spent shells rolled like golden coins. I stayed high, picking off the ones trying to flank him. The stained glass windows turned the muzzle flashes into hellish rainbows. When the smoke cleared, 12 bodies cooled on holy ground. Only Vinny still breathed, dragging himself toward the altar, leaving a red smear. Dante crouched beside him. You wanted my throne, he said conversationally. It's yours. He pressed the shotgun into Vinny's shaking hands, forced the barrel under his own chin, and pulled Vinny's finger on the trigger. The blast took the top of Vinny's head off and painted the crucifix crimson. Dante stood, looked up at the choir loft, and nodded once. I descended the stairs slowly, stepping over bodies, the ring on my finger now flecked with fresh blood. Outside, Callahan waited exactly where Dante said he would, leaning against his unmarked Crown Vic, cigarette glowing. When he saw us emerge, his hand went to his holster. Dante raised both hands, empty. Detective, you're late. Callahan sneered. You're under arrest, Russo. I stepped out from behind Dante, gun already up. Callahan's eyes widened. The bullet took him center mass. He looked down at the hole in his chest, surprised, like betrayal was a foreign language. I walked forward and put 2 more in his heart. He was dead before he hit the pavement. Sirens in the distance, too far to matter. We left him there with his badge in a puddle of his own blood. Back at the Cliff House, Dante poured 2 more glasses of the amber liquor. We didn't speak. We simply drank, staring at the city lights far below, now quiet for the first time in years. He broke the silence first. 1 left on your list. I knew who he meant. The name I'd never spoken aloud. The one I'd buried deeper than all the others. I turned the ring on my finger. Not tonight. He didn't push. We both knew some ghosts needed to ripen. Instead, he took the glass from my hand, set it aside, and kissed me slow and deliberate, tasting of gunpowder and communion wine. This time we didn't stop at holding each other. Clothes fell away like lies. Skin met skin, scars mapping scars. He lifted me onto the counter, mouth hot on my throat, my breasts lower. I arched into him, nails scoring his back, drawing fresh blood because I needed to know he was real. When he finally pushed inside me, it felt like surrender and conquest all at once. We moved together hard, desperate like the ring cutting into his shoulder where I gripped him. After, we lay tangled on the rug in front of the fireplace, sweat cooling, heartbeat slowing. He traced the line of my hip with 1 finger. "Marry me," he said into the dark. I laughed, soft and incredulous. "You don't do romance, Russo." "This isn't romance. This is ownership." His hand closed over the ring. "You're already wearing my blood. Might as well make it legal." I turned to look at him. "And if I say no?" He smiled against my neck. "You won't." Arrogant bastard. I kissed him to shut him up, and again because I wanted to. Later, when the fire burned low, he whispered the last truth I wasn't ready for. "There's a ledger," he said, "in the lake house safe. Your father's handwriting. He didn't just skim heroin money. He sold me out to the feds. Names, dates, routes. That's why I couldn't let him live." I went very still. "He knew they'd come for you next," Dante continued. "He begged me to protect you. I refused. Then I watched you through that vent and something shifted. I decided I'd rather burn the world than let them touch you." I closed my eyes. The final piece clicked into place, ugly and perfect. My father hadn't hanged himself. Dante had done it for him. Mercy killing, wrapped in rope. I should have hated him. Instead, I turned in his arms and kissed him again, deeper, tasting grief and gratitude, and something too dark to name. "Tomorrow," I whispered against his mouth, "we open that safe." He exhaled like a man finally forgiven. "Tomorrow," he agreed. Outside, snow began to fall, silent, clean, covering the blood the city would never fully wash away. Inside, 2 monsters slept in each other's arms, dreaming of the last name on a list that now only had 1 line left. Mine. I woke up alone. The bed beside me was still warm, but Dante was gone. Sunlight knifed through the blinds, cutting across the sheets like prison bars. The ruby ring glinted on my finger, heavier than any shackle I'd ever worn. I found him in the war room he'd never shown me before. A windowless chamber behind the library, walls covered in maps, photographs, red string connecting faces, and places like veins. He stood in the center wearing only black trousers, a cigarette burning between his fingers, staring at a single sheet of paper pinned to the corkboard. My father's suicide note. The one the police photographed and released. The one I had memorized at 15. Only now I saw the truth. The handwriting was my father's, yes, but the ink was fresher in certain lines. Forged. Corrected. Signed in blood that wasn't his. Dante didn't turn when I entered. "I wrote the last paragraph," he said quietly. "The part about forgiving his debts and asking you to live a clean life. He was already dead when I dipped the pen in the puddle under his shoes." I stopped breathing. He didn't look at me. He begged me to make it look like suicide so you'd get the insurance money. So you wouldn't spend your life running from what he'd done. I walked forward until I stood beside him. The note trembled in the air conditioning. "I hated you for years," I whispered. "I know. I hated myself more for still breathing when he wasn't." He finally met my eyes. "I kept you alive because I was selfish. Then I kept you alive because I couldn't imagine a world where you weren't." The cigarette burned down to the filter. He crushed it under his heel. "The last name on your list is Alara Voss," he said. "You put it there the night you killed Marco. You just didn't know it yet." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means the girl in the vents has to die tonight, completely, so the woman wearing my ring can live." He pulled a dossier from the table and handed it to me. Inside, new passport, driver's license, birth certificate. Name, Dante Russo. Marital status, married. Photo, me, taken while I slept beside him last night. I looked up. "You're insane." "I'm thorough." He opened a second folder. Plane tickets, a villa in Capri, accounts in the Caymans holding more money than I could burn in 3 lifetimes. "Tonight the city believes Dante Russo and his new bride disappeared after the church massacre. Bodies burned beyond recognition will be found in a car at the bottom of the river. Dental records will match. The empire dissolves. The war ends." I laughed, a cracked sound. "And the real us? We vanish, or we stay and finish what we started. Your choice." I closed the folder. "I choose door number 3. He raised an eyebrow. "I choose to walk back into that city one last time. I want to look every ghost in the eye and tell them I won." Something fierce and proud flared in his face. "Then we give them a finale." We drove back at twilight. The city was in chaos. Headlines screaming about the church slaughter, the courthouse bloodbath, the cop found executed on sacred ground. My face, our faces, were everywhere. Wanted, armed, dangerous. They called me the Black Widow of Red Hook. They had no idea. We went to the lake house first, the one place no one would look because everyone thought it had burned years ago. Inside, the safe waited exactly where he said. Code 0418. The night my father died, it opened with a soft click. Inside, the original ledger. My father's real handwriting, page after page of betrayal. Names of federal agents, dates, dollar amounts. And at the very back, a sealed envelope addressed to me in shaking script. I opened it with fingers that didn't shake at all. "My dearest Alara, if you're reading this, I'm gone and the devil kept his word. I sold my soul and yours with it. Forgive me. Run. Burn this book. Live clean. I love you more than the air I no longer deserve." Dad, I folded the letter, slipped it into my pocket, and took the ledger. Dante watched me, silent. I met his eyes. "We're burning something tonight, but not this." We drove to the roof of the tallest building Dante still secretly owned, the one that looked down on the courthouse, the river, the church, the port. Every place we had bled. He carried a metal drum, gasoline, a flare gun. I carried the ledger and a bottle of the amber liquor we'd shared the night everything changed. We stood at the edge, wind whipping my hair across my face like a veil. Below, the city crawled with police lights, news helicopters, people who thought they were hunting us. Dante poured gasoline over the drum, over the ledge, over everything that tied us to this life. I opened the ledger to the page where my father had signed his death warrant and tore it out. I held it up so the wind caught it. "This is for the girl who hid in the vents," I said, and let it go. The paper fluttered once, then spiraled down into the night. I tore out another page. "This is for the girl who pulled the trigger on Marco." Another, for the girl who shot a priest in cold blood. Another, for the girl who kissed the devil and liked it. Page after page, I fed the wind our sins until only the cover remained. Dante handed me the flare gun. I aimed at the sky and fired. The flare arced high, a red comet, then fell straight into the gasoline-soaked drum. The explosion was beautiful. Fire roared up the side of the building, licking the sky, turning night into inferno. Alarms screamed, helicopters banked hard. We stood at the heart of it, heat blistering our faces, and I finally felt clean. Dante pulled me against him, mouth to my ear over the roar. "Dante Russo," he said, tasting the name like a vow. "Will you burn the rest of the world with me?" I turned in his arms, kissed him hard, tasting smoke and forever. "Yes," I said. "But first we disappear." We walked away from the fire, hand in hand, down the service elevator, into a waiting car that would take us to a private airstrip. Behind us, the city burned its myths to the ground. Ahead of us, the horizon was wide open. Years later, on a terrace in Capri, overlooking water so blue it hurt, I would still wear the ruby ring. I would still wake some nights, reaching for the .38 that no longer slept under my pillow. I would still feel Dante's hand on my throat in the dark, grounding me, reminding me I was alive. And every anniversary of the night the city lost its king and gained a queen. A single red flare would light the sky above the old skyline, visible even from Italy. A reminder, a promise, a love letter written in fire, because some stories don't end with a wedding or a happily ever after. Some stories end with two people stepping into the flames together, choosing each other over absolution, choosing damnation because it was theirs. I was never a stranger in a courtroom once. Now I am the reason the devil learned how to smile. And if anyone ever asks why the most ruthless man in New York defended a nobody that day, tell them the truth. He didn't defend me. He recognized me. The girl in the vents had always been his equal. She just needed the world to burn before she claimed her throne. If you liked the story, drop a comment for part 2, and don't forget to subscribe to Mara's Betrayal.